Hello and welcome to another webinar from Endress+Hauser Australia. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your time. My name is Preet John. Feel free to call me PJ, and I am the product manager here from the marketing department. Today, I'll be your humble host, and we'll be discussing the Memosens 2.0 and its new features and how it's going to improve your processes. Just get the clicks. So before we get started, I might just ask if everyone can just let us know if you can hear me well, if you can see the screen well, if you can see and hear everything well. And just before we get going, for those of you who may not be used to the GoToWebinar interface, here are some simple guidelines that we've got up here on the screen. We won't be using our webcams for you guys. Maybe in the future we will. But on your right-hand side, as you can see, you will see a dashboard where you can download the handouts that we have, ask any questions you want in the chat, and usually you'll also find any links that we want to drop in that section as well. Just to keep it time friendly, any questions that do come up, we will try and answer them at the end of the presentation. And if we don't have enough time to get to your question, or we don't have enough time period, don't worry, send us an email or get in touch with your local E&H contact and we'll get straight to that question. So let's get started. The contents of this webinar is pretty simple. We're firstly going to go and look at the overview of the liquid analysis portfolio so you understand what we're talking about and where we're sitting with this particular webinar. We're then going to talk about what is Memosens. So I'm aware that most of the people here know what Memosens are, but just in case, we'll just cover a little bit of a brief topic on what it is and what the actual Memosens 2.0 has got in terms of features, benefits, any visual changes, anything that you guys would like to see and use in your processes as well. We're also going to have a look at some of the samples that we have here to look at some optical changes, so visual changes that you're going to notice when you order a new Memosens 2.0. And we're also going to give you two very good demonstrations, one to show how simple and safe it is, and another one to show you how you can get connected with it. So stay tuned for that one. We'll see how it goes. So as a quick introduction to our product portfolio, our product portfolio in the liquid analysis is, as you can see, quite extensive. We have a huge range of pH probes, which is available in all sorts of variations and applicable in most industry applications. This also spreads over to conductivity, dissolved oxygen, disinfection, turbidity, many more. We also have an extensive range of analyzers from COD, sodium, ammonium, nitrates. The range is forever growing. And as you can understand, we look after all of this portfolio for Australia. Today, what we're going to be really talking about, though, is the sensors and transmitters, namely this product range here. So these are the ones that has the Memosens heads on them, and that's what we're going to talk about. And that's what we're going to be covering on terms of what it is and what upgrades you're seeing in the 2.0 process. So what is Memosens? And the tagline, simple, safe, and connected. So as you can see here, we do have available some of our old analog connections, such as the GSA and the top 6/8 connections. We know that some competitors also use these type of connectors as well. These traditional sensors, they're all open contacts, as you can see. Open contact simply means that it's always there to be prone from corrosion, and it also has the potential for salt bridges. And generally, when you're using this sort of product in open environments, that is a potential threat. With the Memosens, it is a completely inductive source, which means there is no open contact, there is no metal source there for it to be corrosive. You'll actually see in our demonstration later on how handy that will be for someone in this environment. It's been invented by Endress+Hauser, and the patent's held by us as well. So but also to prevent a single source site situation, it's an open protocol. Anyone can sort of get their hands on it as long as they are able to connect with our transmitters and our devices. So just to read more about that, just to understand it a bit more, we won't cover that topic today, but we'll just drop in a link into the chat window and you'll be able to read more about it. And you can also get that link right there on the screen. Okay. So what does that do? So utilizing this additional information, it allows you to have insights to provide plant availability, ensure product quality, and deliver improved safety. Now, I can go on and on about this, I really can, because you've got the ability to have now digitalization in the sensors to then use our very famous and very popular heartbeat sensor technology, and it allows you to do both to provide you these insights. Now, I won't, because we don't have the time, but there is a webinar that has been done previously by us, by our industry managers and our regional managers, and what you can do is view that webinar for yourself, and we will drop a link to that webinar into the chat as well. So must admit, very good webinar, and I would advise anyone who wants to learn how to get more digital information into their insights to watch that webinar. But now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about specifically the Memosens 2.0 and its specific product features, okay? Memosens technology was launched in about 2004. So think of it this way. It's the same technology that's been around for over a decade. A good way to break it down for you. Just like your iPhones, your Androids, generally you always have the one phone for about 2 to 3 years, and then after a while, the hardware on it and the software can only go so far. Before you know it, you have to start upgrading your phone. Once you upgrade your phone, you get new features, new features and new abilities on that phone to be able to do more. So just like that, we are now getting more out of the Memosens 2.0. We're getting increased sensor performance, we're getting better data storage capabilities, but we're also able to add in additional configurations that's going to help you in your process. So just to cover off a couple of those things, how do you order one of these new e-sensors? Okay, so with the Memosens 2.0, our order codes are slightly different. Okay, with the new electronic hardware upgrades, the necessity to make the change in the part number was there. So the next generation of sensors, what you're currently ordering, generally has a part number that configures with a D at the end. You will now order one that finishes with an E at the end. Simple as that. That way you know you're moving on to the next series of product. Just a little word to advise though, the disinfection range will remain in the D series format. Think of them as that that family member that you invite to a party and you ask them to be there at about 9 p.m. and they always mosey in at about 10 p.m. So they're going to arrive, they're just going to be a little bit late. But we will make sure we keep you notified about market changes on that. So let's just get straight into the new features. What are you going to see when you're using a Memosens 2.0 as opposed to a Memosens first generation model? There is a lot of detail in the upgrades, but we'll keep this relatively brief for the overview across the pH, conductivity, and dissolved oxygen. So first things first, the new software will mean that if you want to use these new features, you will have to upgrade your transmitter, namely the CM44X mods. When you do, one of the very first things you'll notice is that you'll get a configurable CIP counter. So what is it? A fixed CIP counter is available for the pH, conductivity, and dissolved oxygen sensors. And in the past years, the CIP cycles have become more individual depending on the application and the customer. So the demand for it was there. Now we've actually implemented it in all of the Memosens 2.0 sensors. So this gives you the opportunity to monitor these sensors and see the impact of it on the sensor itself. In the same regard, you also have a configurable SIP or sterilization counter. So individual SIP parameters can be set for precise monitoring. Even sterilization in the lab via an autoclave can be included by the counter, manually set by a MemoBase Plus or the MemoBase Pro app. I think overall what I'm trying to deliver the message in these last two slides is that between the two configurable features, you're able to gain traceability into CIP and SIP processes to understand the burden on the sensors. Okay. Calibration history. So this is a good one. The current Memosens first generation models really only have the last calibration or adjustment in the head, and that's it. The new Memosens 2.0 has up to 8 calibration adjustments and can be stored in the head of the sensor. So every sensor has its own calibration history in its head. That makes it easy for trace calibration actions and also to see trends and optimize calibration and adjustment cycles for predictive maintenance. You can also do distinguish between a calibration and an adjustment. So just to be clear, new is, sorry, I'll start again. Just to be clear, calibration means that the comparison between the target value and the existing measurement is required within the limit values, but no other action is required. So that will be the calibration. An adjustment means that the existing value is changed to the target value. So this is a change to the system that is now clearly documented in the sensor head, and everyone can review that in its history. This is also a handy feature. One of the 8 calibration data packets that you can store in the sensor head, one of them is the factory calibration. So let's just review why that you would want that. Say, for example, if someone wants to swap shifts and they're using an old buffer solution or an expired buffer solution, or when they did a site calibration, something was not quite right, you can always return back to reliable data. So that would mean then you don't have to keep repeating the calibration or adjustment process. You can just go back to that factory calibration. Very handy tool to have. And that is available across all 3 functions with pH, ORP, conductivity, and dissolved oxygen, as you can see here. Digital sensor label. Now, you might wonder why you would be worried about this, but let me explain. So a digital sensor label is also known as a tag. Now, what is a tag? A tag is generally used to, and is intended really for an assist to make sure that the sensor and the transmitter are paired for that application. This means that if the sensor was incorrect tagged, and it will be rejected by the transmitter. So the digital sensor label is then a text that can be set individually. So as you can see here, install 0.7, and you can set that at a particular measurement point in your process. Now, you take that probe out, you go into service and calibrate, bring another probe in, and it's not actually digitally tagged for that process, the transmitter can reject it. So that's a good way to make sure that your operating processes are in line with your calibration processes. Very, very helpful for people who do regular maintenance and regular calibrations on applications that require it. So as you can see there, you can view it, and then once it's there, reuse that same tag. Some extra new things that you'll notice in your Memosens 2.0. In the past, you could only use the Liquidline CM42 with the D series to get a EX compatibility. Granted, CM44X in the past was not really available in the EX format. It is, and we will be launching information about that soon enough. But when you didn't have the option to use a CM42 or CM44X and you wanted to use one of our Liquidline CM72s and 82s, you'll see that you cannot have an EX compatibility with the D sensors, but you can with the E sensors. And that's because for every one of our sensors that now come out with an E sensor structure, means that it has an EX approval associated with it. This also means that the cables that are going to connect to the transmitter to the sensor are also EX approved. So all these documentations are now readily available for you to download and review yourself. So that is the quick overview about all the extra advantages that you now have with upgrading yourself to a Memosens 2.0 sensor. But what we want to now do is have a quick look at some of the optical changes. So when I mean optical, I mean what are the visual changes that you're going to see in ordering a new Memosens E-series. We'll look at the packaging, we'll look at the KCL cap on the pH and ORP. You'll be interested to see why. We'll talk about the new ion traps on selected pH probes and the new salt storage locations on some of the selected pH probes. So if you have a look, the old packaging is that top one there, along with the one over here. And as you can see, it's now been improved with a little bit more visual detail on what you're getting and how you're getting it. It's no longer an animated, it's an actual photograph, and a clear label, a little bit easier to read on dust and dirty environments. Now I've got a unit here. I'm sorry if you can't see it clearly in my hand, but a new KCI cap. So why I want to show you this. This is the D series, okay? Still a good unit, it's still a very good probe, but when you look at it closely, it's got a silicon cap, okay? And the KCL is squeezed in and it's sort of compressed fit. So it does the job, but it can be a little bit annoying. So the new cap, as you can see here, has got a bayonet fitting, and as such, easy to use and easy to distract. Quite easy and quite friendly. The cap gives us. Don't have that one using. Now, before we go there, before we go to this side, actually, I just want to quickly cover off as well is that you'll notice that some of the ISFET sensors are also going to be a bit different. So here's the D series ISFET sensor. It's got the old chip on it, and as you can see, it's got a cut. And the new ISFET sensor here has got a much better chip, and it's a little bit better compatibility with CIP processors. So those are the two main differences that you'll notice in the the ISFETs as well. So the story with the ion traps. So here we can see a bit of a graphic example of a unit without an ion trap. You can see that the outer lead reference is within a glass capillary, but it's open at the top. The old one, so this is the one that has the Memosens first generation, it has an ion trap within the glass capillary, okay? And it's open at the bottom. So the new one will have an ion trap surrounding the entire circumference down here, and the glass capillary is actually open at the top. So what does this mean? Having a look at the old and having a look at the new. With a new ion trap, it has a higher exchange capacity. So more ions can be blocked, longer lifetime of the sensor itself, okay? The inner lead reference and the reference lead is closer together. So same temperature behavior means that it's going to get higher accuracy at varying temperatures. Longer diffusion path means that lower concentration gradient equals higher accuracy. So that means the drift is going to be a lot lower, more accurate to 0 point. Unfortunately, I do not have a demonstration unit here to show you, but as you can see, here's the old and here's the new. The old has the salt storage down the bottom here, with the new one, the salt storage is maintaining up at the top. So what does that mean? The improved location means that it's actually got a slower dissolvent, and we use a 3 molar KCl at the reference lead, remains stable for a lot longer. Constant electrochemical potential means that it's also got a less drift. Better control of consumption, clearly visible when the KCl storage is consumed, and higher accuracy also at varying temperatures. So that also helps because the inner lead and reference leads are closer together. Something else that you may not have been able to see in that demo, hopefully you can now see. It's probably not clear enough, but on the top of these, that's why I've got it on the screen as well. You have a QR scanner, which allows you to get immediate access to the data matrix. So you imagine this is going in and outside of a process, and what you're going to find is that after a while, all the laser etchings are just going to wear off and dissolve, and sometimes that's what happens. So rather than trying to understand the traceability of the serial number on top of the probe head, you've got a QR scanner that you can just scan, and it'll give you all the information straight into our database. So that's an exceptional feature. And that basically covers all the visual and optical updates on the Memosens 2.0. But what I would like to do now is to jump straight into a bit of a demonstration to show you, number one, how simple it is to connect a Memosens connector, and number two, how safe it is under any sort of harsh environment. Okay. So, thank you, Jason. Rightio. No fish were harmed in the making of this webinar, just saying. So what I've got on the table here with me, if you can see, is I have a CM44X unit, okay? This is now in alarm mode because, well, nothing's connected to it, okay? What you will find is that in any situation, generally speaking, now, granted, most of the times if you're using an analog sensor, and you have an open contact, this is a problem. Just to show you how much of a not of a problem it is for us, I'm going to remain this probe under water. I'm going to take this cable underwater. And as you can see, I've established a connection. And even after it's been underwater for a bit, just give it a minute and you'll see the connection is live. The head of the connector is actually underwater and it connected it just fine. And as you can see, the connection was clear and stable. You may not be able to read it, but the pH reading of this tank is about 6.9. So it's reading just fine. Something else to note as well, if you were to switch the probe, so at the moment, I've accepted the CM44 to have this particular glass pH probe. Now, if I wanted to, actually, I'll even change it up. If I wanted to use a conductivity sensor, and this cable was connected to the CM44, and it was programmed for the glass pH probe. As you can see, the alarm's gone because the communications have been unplugged. This is a conductivity sensor. It's now connected. It'll still alarm, but now what it's telling me is that I've just changed from a glass pH probe to a 4-pole conductivity probe, and do I accept? And I do. And as soon as I accept, the connection is clear. Why I demonstrated that? We deal with a lot of panels, and when you have the CM44 set up like this with only one cable output, that makes total sense why you would actually not need it. But when you have a module that can take multiple inputs and be able to plug into multiple parameters such as disinfection, pH, conductivity, sometimes you may connect the wrong cable to the unit, but this prevents you from doing so. Even more so, if you actually have the connection with a digitally tagged sensor, you can't get this wrong. So again, keeping it simple, keeping it safe. Of course, the last demonstration I'll show you is with one of our ISVETs. And again, same thing, we were just connected to a conductivity probe. It's asking me now, I've changed from a conductivity to an ISVET. Okay, perfectly fine. And it even takes the reading as well. Look at that. So that demonstrates for you what and how it is so simple to use one of our Memosens 2.0 connectors. What we've also actually set up for you, and we've done it a little bit earlier, is that we actually have a demonstration on connected. So this is using our SmartBlue app. So what I'll do is I'll just put the demonstration of the video up on the screen. And then after the demonstration, if you want to download the app yourself, we've got the QR codes that you can use on your phone to download the app. Just bear with us for 1 minute while we get the video up. In this demonstration, we will show you how easy it is to be connected to the Memosens probes. Here we have an RIA46 acting as a field display which has an analog output capability. This is then connected to the CM82 transmitter, which is then connected to our pH probe. The RIA46 provides you with a local visual check of the probe's pH value, and we are using it to show you in this demonstration the readings from this pH probe. But you can opt to order the CM82 on its own as a standalone transmitter. And before we go ahead and demonstrate this, I'd just like to show you what would happen if you did disconnect the probe from the setup. Here you can see the RIA46 is alarming with an F45 code. You will also see a red steady flashing light on the CM82. And now we'll reconnect it to show you what happens. Here you will see a stable reading on the Rio 46 as it's no longer an alarm. And on the CM82 you'll also see a steady flashing green light. Now here's where we make things interesting. In order to communicate with the CM82, you have to have a smartphone and download our SmartBlue app. This is available on Android and Apple devices. So for this demonstration, I'm using an iPhone, so I've downloaded the SmartBlue app off the App Store. And what you'll see is that it will immediately scan for nearby Bluetooth devices. And we can see on the list here, the CM82 is listed straight away as the nearby Bluetooth device. Now when I select this, it will ask you for a username and password, but because I've already logged in this before, it recognizes me, and I've used the iPhone's Face ID recognition locking software to allow me to gain access straight away. But for you, if you wanted to use it for the first time, the username would be admin and the serial number would be the password. I do recommend that once you do have this all set up in your process, you actually go about changing the password to something that you all can use, and it'll be much simpler for you. So what you'll see here is the CM82 connected to a pH sensor, and you can see all the values there. So we'll go through and show you what you can do with the subset menus. So that's the 3 lines at the bottom. So once you select the 3 lines at the bottom, you can see guidance, diagnostics, applications, and system. So just as a brief overview, if you look at guidance, we'll take you to calibration and measurement parameter. If you select guidance again, and then you select the pH, which is what we're connected to, and you have choices. You can choose to have a 1-point calibration, a 2-point calibration, or even to do a sample calibration, which is pretty nifty for people who need to do things on site. So if you go back, straight back, and this is what you would consider the root menu. Now, the other thing that people will be finding interesting is the diagnostics. So if we select the diagnostics, and what you can see is the diagnostics list. Now, this is a list of the diagnostics that it's giving you for the device it's currently set up on, which is our pH probe. So there's nothing to see here because it's quite brand new out of the box. But as a diagnostics logbook, we've used the CM82 before on other cases to see what the errors could be, and here is a couple of examples of what you can see in the logbook of the diagnostics. Now if I go back one, and you can also choose to run a simulation. So the simulation allows you to play around with settings like the current value, the measurement of the pH, or even the temperature. So for example, if I wanted to, if you take a look at the note at the top, PV 7.6 with SV 20.8. Now, if we wanted to play around with that, you can just hit simulation on temperature, switch it on, and immediately you'll see it flash a reddish maroon color. You hit OK, and we've just got this set at 75 degrees. So you can change that to whatever you'd like to simulate something. So say, for example, 60 degrees. And you will see at the top there that it's registering that you're reading 7.6 at 60 degrees, but in brackets SIMU, which is representation of simulation, and just in case, also a image of a spanner showing you that it is under a simulation. So we'll just go ahead and turn that back off, hit OK, and it'll go back to the actual temperature reading that's in the tank. Another nifty little feature is to also understand the diagnostic settings. So you can choose when to alarm and register the alarms and put them into the diagnostics log. So you can set how many seconds with the range of 0 to 180, and you can also set it so once it exceeds a certain current range, when to actually log the error. And another fantastic feature, I believe, is a registry of all the different errors so you understand what you're seeing. So for example, if I selected the F130, it can tell you that it's an alarm in failure, to check the cables or replace the sensor. So all very handy little diagnostic tools within the SmartBlue app. And then when we go to the application,
You can also sit there and have a look at how you can register this. So obviously you can play around with the different types of temperature units. You can also look at the sensor, which will give you all the details of the sensor. And if you also click on extended setup, you can actually set all of those things there as well, which is really handy. So we'll just go back. And then if you look at system is more to do with the CM82 than it does with the actual probe itself. So you can see here, and this is what I said before, you can use the username, which is admin, and the current password, which is the serial number, and change it to something that your company would use. That's a little bit more applicable to your process. You can also type in sensor information, and that will give you details of the probe, including the serial number, tag ID that it's on, all the necessary information to help you trace. You can also do firmware updates here, and also have a look at the device management. And at any time at all, if you need to go back to the home screen, you hit the little house button at the bottom, and that takes you to the home menu.
And it's that simple. With the use of the Smart Blue app, you are now connected to the Memosens probe. Yep. Okay, well, we hope you enjoyed that video. If you want to actually download the Smart Blue app, as you can see behind me, you've got 2 QR scans. I'm going to step out of the way so you can scan them now. Otherwise, you're more than happy to search for Smart Blue on either the Apple's App Store or Google Play or Android Play Store. And you should be able to download those apps. And any device that we have in the Endress+Hauser portfolio that has Bluetooth, usually you can use the Smart Blue app to connect to it. It's a fantastic tool. But to finalize this webinar in terms of what we're trying to offer with simple, safe, and now connected, this is just one way of doing it. If there is a CM44X model that you have that's got interfacing with APL, maybe even Profibus, you can connect to your devices that way to get the readings remotely. And of course, the fantastic feature of heartbeat as well. So that pretty much concludes the majority of this webinar. And I've got this here in front of me, and I do have a couple of questions, so thank you for that. So now we're going to just go into the question time. The question I've got, the first one is that I mentioned, so someone's paying attention now, I mentioned that will the CM44 be EX soon? The answer to that is yes, it will be. We will make sure that we publicize that to everyone. It has been something that has been rolled out this year from the factory. So stay tuned on that note. The second question I got was, how much more life will the improved ion trap give me? This is not exactly a clear-cut question, but what I will say is that it really comes down to the type of application you're dealing with. So if you're dealing with an application within food and bev, you're going to have a certain increase in performance and life versus something within, say, for example, a slurry in a mine pit. So again, there's not going to be one clear-cut answer for all applications, but you will see an improvement. Okay. And I've only got one last question here. Nope, actually two. One more just popped up. Are these new probes backward compatible? Yes, and I'm sorry I didn't mention that before. So just to be very clear, I'll say this again. So when using one of these CM44X transmitters, you are already using a D-series sensor and you may not want all the new features, you just want a replacement sensor, that's perfectly fine. Our sensors will go in place of the old sensor and work exactly the way you had it in the first place. So they are completely 100% backwards compatible. You have no worries about that whatsoever. If you do want to use the new features, however, only the CM44X is capable of doing so, and you must do a software upgrade to that. And that is a firmware upgrade that you can download from our website. There is a procedure, and after this webinar, we will send out a link to a video that shows that procedure. So that's not a problem. So that will definitely happen. Last question. So the last question that popped up was, I basically answered that question in the previous question. So yes, if you do not want the new E-series updates or upgrades, you're more than welcome to use it, but that doesn't mean that you're locked into not ever getting it. All you have to do is upgrade that transmitter and you can get it. It's very simple. And that pretty much concludes all the questions I have in here. If there is a question that is on your mind and like me, it doesn't come up straight away, or maybe you have to think about it a little bit longer, feel free to drop us an email or reach out to your Endress+Hauser contact, and we're more than happy to get back to you on it. But for now, I'll leave you with it. Have a good afternoon. Just remember, we're always innovating. We're always ever evolving our products. We're Endress+Hauser, the people for process automation.